I'm Jamie Jackson, and welcome to the Daily Signal's live coverage of State of the Union 2015. There's so much to talk about before the president takes the podium, and we hope that you will stay right with us during the whole conversation. I'm going to introduce you to our panel of political heavy hitters, and we're going to get started. Starting at the end of our row, is Roland Martin, TV and radio host. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Glad to be here.
Next to him is Jim Carafano and David Azarad, both of the Heritage Foundation. And we also have Crystal Wright, editor and blogger of conservativeblackchick.com. Thanks so much to all of you for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, President Obama is set to take to the podium in just a few moments. I want to start with you, Crystal. What are we expected to hear out of the president tonight?
I think we're going to hear more of what we've heard from the president the last 5 years. He's doubling down. He doesn't seem to want to accept the reality that the American people elected the Republicans to take over Congress because they didn't like the direction of the country. So he's going to launch into a bunch of non-starters with Republicans, like soaking the rich for more taxes. He wants to spend $60 billion to provide free community college to every American. And binders full of vetoes, of course. He's going to wag his finger at Congress with that and say, and if you don't do what I want and implement my agenda, I'm going to just, take my pen and launch an executive order. So I think, we've heard this before, and it just doesn't look like a way that you really want to build bipartisanship and work with Republicans to get anything done.
And James, you
probably work with them, considering in Tennessee the proposal for community college. That's actually where it's coming from. You had 57,000 students in Tennessee, 90% of all high school graduates who expressed an interest in that particular community college program. So passed the Republican legislature, right, signed by Republican governor. So it's going to be a little hard for Republicans to say it's a bad idea when one of their own is actually pushing it.
Wait, just real quick. Tennessee isn't. I think we have lots of other states. I mean, so we're supposed to do policy around one state? Roland?
No, actually.
That's what it seems like you're saying.
So we already know this is going to be a great
show. My whole point is, if you want to make a point about there's no bipartisanship, if you're talking about an initiative that's actually passed by a Republican legislature, signed by a Republican governor, that's overwhelmingly popular by a state, I would think there are other states who'll be also interested in this as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out in terms of the response.
States to take over that particular agenda item. Why make it national? Why make it a federal?
I mean, unlike these guys, I actually don't know what he's going to say. The only thing I know for sure, we were having dinner at the Monocle, which is like the Senate hall, right, which is right behind us, and all the cabinet members were having dinner there before this speech. So all I know for sure is that the cabinet's going to be well fed when he talks. But other than that, I think he's been previewing everything he's going to say. But I actually think that we ought to kind of sit and actually listen to the speech first, and then talk about it. I mean, I really do.
And that we are going to do, and we hope.
But here's the big deal for me, and this is what thing. Tennessee is great, but the entire world is listening to the speech. This is not just a speech for Republicans or Tennessee Republicans. Everybody in the world is listening to the speech because they want to hear what the President of the United States has to say. So this is going to be a speech to the world, and I think that's how we ought to grade it.
Speech to the world, but I think you have Americans who are making it perfectly clear when it comes to the economy. They want him to speak to them. You look at what's happening globally. I mean, first of all, we are in a much better situation than, frankly, a lot of other countries are. But I think Americans, they want to hear bread and butter. We can spend lots of time talking about foreign policy, but at the end of the day, if you are a mother or a father listening to this particular speech, you want to know, what does this mean for my pocketbook? What does it mean for my kid moving forward when it comes to college? What does it mean for me also getting a job? And so I think a lot of times folks in D.C. want this to be so global. But Americans,
that's not what I'm saying.
No.
What I'm saying is, look, I don't care what the president wants to talk about, and I don't care what the American people want to hear. But the reality of the speech is, the world is listening. That's just the reality.
I got you. But
Americans have said they're going to tune out this State of the Union. I mean, lots of people on social media aren't even interested in what this president has to say, because I think there's an apathy. While the president wants to talk about, we've created most jobs in 2014 since the 1990s, people are still underemployed. They're working part-time when they want to work full-time. You have a labor participation rate, the lowest in 35 years, and wages are just not increasing. So, Roland, I agree with you on that. I think the American people want to hear from the president. You say it's great. Unemployment is below 6%, but we're not feeling it in our pocketbook. We're not feeling prosperity. And Black Americans, wow, double-digit unemployment, a constituency who has shown him over 90% of loyalty in 2008 and 2012, and black Americans are not better off. The new incoming chairman of the CBC said black America is in a state of emergency. So I hope Obama has answers for those people.
And when we talk about job creation,
know?
David, I want to bring you in on this. I mean, what should the president be talking about? What should he address specifically that Americans who are watching can identify with and know that, okay, something's going to be done to help me in my current situation?
I don't think the president can do that because the fatal conceit of the State of the Union address is that he's some sort of a prime minister who's addressing a unified state and can tell them what to do. He doesn't even have the power to introduce legislation, much less pass any. So one thing I think Americans who are listening to this should keep in mind is that there's something misleading about the State of the Union address. The president is going to be lecturing and hectoring not only members of Congress, but of the other co-equal branch of government, the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, telling them do this and do that. But Americans need to remember that he has no power to push any of this in Congress.
Well, he has
Executive
action.
So
We've seen that quite a few times.
So if he wants to operate within the bounds of the Constitution, which of course he's not always particularly inclined to do, he can't do. What I think the real focus should be foreign policy. The world is looking pretty scary these days. It's gone worse under his presidency. This is the area where the president has wide latitude, and I think this should be the primary focus of the State of the Union address. Congress doesn't need the president to know how to legislate.
Well,
And the president doesn't need Congress.
but here's the deal when we talk about in terms of where our world is. Part of the problem is the world that we have today is the one none of us have ever had to deal with. Okay, we've always been able to talk about no. Follow me here. It has no. It has nothing to do with him. It has to it has to do with no. Allow me to finish. It has to do with the fact that here we are in a situation where we're dealing with different countries, and a part of our problem is our allies are also allies of people who we think are our enemies. We're in a situation where right now we got ISIS and ISIL, and we're saying one second. We got Al Qaeda, who doesn't like ISIS. And so all of a sudden, they're going at each other. And now we're saying, well, wait a minute. Iran has issues here. Saudi Arabia has issues here. And so we're sort of stuck in this conundrum. And so when it comes to our foreign policy, part of our problem is, well, dang, who is supposedly the good and the bad? Who is supposedly our partner? Who's supposedly our enemy? It's so mixed up that it causes us to say, wait a minute, exactly what is at play here in the world? So it's not as easy as we love to make it. Oh, we can just simply be America. You're good, you're bad. That's pretty much it. It ain't that simple.
All right. So I was not gonna pontificate about what's in the speech, but Roland's first said that foreign policy isn't going to the speech. He said one because Americans don't want to hear about that.
No. Foreign policy will be in the speech.
Yeah, you're right.
But what I'm saying is, for Americans want to hear likely
Right.
more about the economy versus foreign policy.
So you said Americans want to hear about the economy, and this foreign policy stuff is complicated. So the reality of why there's not going to be a lot of foreign policy in the speech, and why the president isn't going to talk about it, is he's had one of the worst foreign policy years in modern presidency.
Well, he's going to talk about it.
No, he is going to talk about it, but
Yeah,
he's
he
going to
is.
talk about the things he wants.
I do know that.
And he's going to talk about the things he'd want to talk about. He might talk about Cuba and his engagement with Cuba. He might talk
He
about
will.
the Iran deal. But what he's not going to talk about is he's not going to talk about Libya. He's not going to talk about what's going on in Yemen today, which one time he said was the way you do counterterrorism. Today, Yemen is literally falling apart as we speak. He's not going to talk about how Iraq was overrun by ISIS. He's not going to talk about how Syria is still a hellhole.
I mean, he can talk about it. He can
but
talk about Iraq being overrun by ISIS.
He's not going to talk.
He can talk.
Wait, you said let me finish, because I'm not done, because the list goes on and on. He's not going to talk about the Ukraine. He's not.
Hello.
gonna-
Aren't you the same one who said, wait a minute, we don't know what he's talking about. But now you're saying he's not going to talk about it. Make up your
We
mind.
know it's going to be a lively.
I
evening.
think
We
what's
want everybody
interesting,
to-
Flip
I think
a coin.
What's interesting, though, is that Roland just said that it's not really foreign policy today is really out of the hands of the president of the
No, I
United
didn't.
States.
No,
That's
if
what
you're going to
you said.
quote me,
Well,
quote me. That's not
excuse
what I
me.
said.
Excuse me.
No,
You did.
if
You
you're
said
going to
it's different.
quote me,
We live in a different
quote
world
me. That's
today.
not what I
Let
said.
her finish.
When you stop talking over me, I'm happy to finish my
No, when you
thought.
actually speak
when
correctly and factually.
you said that we live in a different world
Yes,
than
we
we did
do.
like 50 years ago, as if you were an apologist for the fact, like
It's
Jim
not an
said,
apologist.
this
It's a
president's
different
foreign
world.
policy has been atrocious. Let's go through the list here. All right, so Paris has the worst terror attack since 1960 in decades. He can't even bother to show up with our ally called France, who showed up for us when 9/11 happened. That sends a message, like Jim said, to the world, we're not serious about foreign policy. On Iran, he tells Congress,
That's
in
the
November
Q-span.
2013, the president told America and the world, we're going to negotiate with the mullahs, Iran. And what we're going to do is we're going to give them a timeline. It was April. The president said in November 2013, if Iran doesn't come to the table and come to a nuclear agreement, I'm all for economic sanctions. Now the president's going to stand up before the American people today and threaten Congress with a veto, saying sanctions won't do anything. Well, the only reason Iran is at the table talking about nuclear armament, really, and trying to come to a deal is because of sanctions.
Oh,
then
you actually locked him at the table? Because when he was running, you folks, like you said, don't even talk to him.
So first,
so now you lock him at the table?
So now,
okay, I'm just
now
checking.
Republicans
I'm
in
just
Congress want to hold the president to his deal, and they say not just Republicans, but I think there's a bill in the Senate right now called the Kirk-Menendez bill that says, and it has bipartisan support because Bob Menendez is a Democrat. Democrats agree with Republicans. We got to put sanctions back on the tables because the mullahs are going to keep pushing the deadline while they nuclear up. And then the president can't even say the word terrorist, and he wants to close Guantanamo Bay. I mean, on and on, this president doesn't show the world strength at all. So, Roland, no. The world is in chaos because it doesn't know where we stand. We're on Jell-O when it comes to foreign policy.
All right, so foreign policy, as we know, obviously one of the topics that will be discussed tonight. Let's talk about lots of rumors, so to speak, in Washington about the president possibly suggesting raising taxes. Who wants to start on that one? Roland?
Washington and rumors? Okay. Okay, and pick a day. Pick a day. I mean, look, the president...
How does this president expect to get anything done if he's not going to work with Congress?
Well, first of all, how do we know he's not going to work for Congress? How do we know that?
Well, first of all, you know he's already.
We've seen it so far.
No, but how do we know that? But here's the deal, though. But last I checked, when it comes to the notion of working, two folks actually have to work. So we talk about him working with Congress, but should Congress also work with him? I mean, should both folks actually have a role here? Because here's the reality. When folks go to the polls, they do expect something to get done. When you look at the polling data in terms of where Americans feel where this Congress is, I mean, they have the lowest out of anybody, okay? They're even lowest than pundits. They're even lowest than lawyers, okay? Because here's what I simply ask the Speaker, John Boehner, as well as to Bishop McConnell. I'm going to say the same thing to Senator Harry Reid. Just show up to work every day.
Roland,
Just please, show up to work and actually attempt to actually get some work done for the American people. No, first of all, the Congress in the last 4 years has worked the fewest in how long?
But if we're going to have a conversation after let's have a serious conversation. So talking about Congress is
Yeah.
but let me finish. We all know
serious
that
conversations go to work.
Let me finish. We all know that's a joke, right? Because we all know that people vote for a senator and congressman. They don't vote for a team, right? And we also know that, and you know that, and you know this, right? It takes a president and a Congress to get together and make legislation. So to blame everybody and exclude anybody isn't right. So why don't we debate about real issues instead of like just throwing talking points back and forth?
Well, first of all, that's fine with me. I'm not the one throwing the stuff out. I'm making it perfectly clear. That's why I made the point when we talk about, can he work with Congress? It requires.
So when was the last time the president worked with Congress,
requires
Roland?
both parties to do so, and that's why I'm making the point in terms of where are the issues there, in terms of where you do the support. So when I threw out the whole issue, when you brought up community college, okay, which is one of those issues.
When was the last time the president worked with
And when I
Congress?
talked about the fact that here's an idea
Okay, I
that
think you answered
coming
the
from a red state, then your first reaction is, oh, well, forget that. I mean, it's like, okay, I know it's an idea, but how are we going to still pay for it? It is still an idea that if you're an American sitting out there and you're seeing more than $1 trillion in student loan debt, when you're sitting here realizing that as employers, they're saying we're getting people who don't have any skills. There are a lot of people out there, okay, outside of this city who are saying, you know what, that's a good idea. Maybe what we should do is actually listen to them and begin to say, if they like it, let's figure out how to pay for it as opposed to poo-poo it and say we shouldn't do
I
it.
think a better program is vocational training. Not everybody should be going to college. This is the problem. So we're at a time now where we need plumbers. You know, I have plumbers and electricians coming to my home and saying they can't find apprentices to do these jobs that pay quite well. So you're saying
Who trains
everybody
Who
needs
trains
to go to college. Community college is not where somebody's going to learn how to be a plumber.
And this is
we need to be
this is where you're wrong. In
vocational
Chicago,
training
but
back to the
Crystal,
public
this is
school
where you're wrong.
system.
In the city of Chicago, ComEd Electric Company, they had a shortage of people who were literally climbing the utility poles. They got with Kennedy College, a city college of
And
Chicago.
government isn't
Excuse me
the
1
solution
second.
to everything.
Allow me to finish.
Why are you
Allow
yelling?
me to finish.
Why are you yelling?
ComEd got with a
Why are you
community college,
yelling?
created a particular program to say,
Okay.
we're going to train the individuals in terms of what we do. Starting salary of those who were hired to complete the program, $70,000.
And we're going to pause.
That was a
right-
community
we're
college.
gonna pause right there, Roland. This has been very lively discussion, but the president is getting close to the podium. So right now we're going to head straight live to Congress for the State of the Union.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States. Thank you. Thank you so much, please. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans. We are 15 years into this new century. 15 years that dawned with terror touching our shores, that unfolded with a new generation fighting two long and costly wars, that saw a vicious recession spread across our nation and the world. It has been and still is a hard time for many. But tonight, we turn the page. Tonight, after a breakthrough year for America, our economy is growing and creating jobs at the fastest pace since 1999. Our unemployment rate is now lower than it was before the financial crisis. More of our kids are graduating than ever before. More of our people are insured than ever before. And we are as free from the grip of foreign oil as we've been in almost 30 years. Tonight, for the first time since 9/11, our combat mission in Afghanistan is over. Six years ago, nearly 180,000 American troops served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, fewer than 15,000 remain. And we salute the courage and sacrifice of every man and woman in this 9/11 generation who has served to keep us safe. We are humbled and grateful for your service. America, for all that we have endured, for all the grit and hard work required to come back, for all the tasks that lie ahead, know this: the shadow of crisis has passed, and the state of the union is strong. At this moment, with a growing economy, shrinking deficits, bustling industry, booming energy production, we have risen from recession freer to write our own future than any other nation on earth. It's now up to us to choose who we want to be over the next 15 years and for decades to come. Will we accept an economy where only a few of us do spectacularly well? Or will we commit ourselves to an economy that generates rising incomes and chances for everyone who makes the effort? Will we approach the world fearful and reactive, dragged into costly conflicts that strain our military and set back our standing? Or will we lead wisely, using all elements of our power to defeat new threats and protect our planet? Will we allow ourselves to be sorted into factions and turned against one another? Or will we recapture the sense of common purpose that has always propelled America forward? In 2 weeks, I will send this Congress a budget filled with ideas that are practical, not partisan. And in the months ahead, I'll crisscross the country making a case for those ideas. So tonight, I want to focus less on a checklist of proposals and focus more on the values at stake in the choices before us. It begins with our economy. 7 years ago, Rebecca and Ben Earler of Minneapolis were newlyweds. She waited tables, he worked construction. Their first child, Jack, was on the way. They were young and in love in America. And it doesn't get much better than that. If only we had known, Rebecca wrote to me last spring, what was about to happen to the housing and construction market. As the crisis worsened, Ben's business dried up, so he took what jobs he could find, even if they kept him on the road for long stretches of time. Rebecca took out student loans and enrolled in community college and retrained for a new career. They sacrificed for each other. And slowly it paid off. They bought their first home. They had a second son, Henry. Rebecca got a better job and then a raise. Ben's back in construction and home for dinner every night. It is amazing, Rebecca wrote, what you can bounce back from when you have to. We are a strong, tight-knit family who has made it through some very, very hard times. We are a strong, tight-knit family who has made it through some very, very hard times. America, Rebecca and Ben's story is our story. They represent the millions who've worked hard and scrimped and sacrificed and retooled. You are the reason that I ran for this office. You are the people I was thinking of 6 years ago today, in the darkest months of the crisis, when I stood on the steps of this Capitol and promised we would rebuild our economy on a new foundation. And it has been your resilience, your effort, that has made it possible for our country to emerge stronger. We believed we could reverse the tide of outsourcing and draw new jobs to our shores. And over the past 5 years, our businesses have created more than 11 million new jobs. We believed we could reduce our dependence on foreign oil and protect our planet. And today, America is #1 in oil and gas. America is #1 in wind power. Every 3 weeks, we bring online as much solar power as we did in all of 2008. And thanks to lower gas prices and higher fuel standards, the typical family this year should save about $750 at the pump. We believed we could prepare our kids for a more competitive world. And today, our younger students have earned the highest math and reading scores on record. Our high school graduation rate has hit an all-time high. More Americans finish college than ever before. We believe that sensible regulations could prevent another crisis, shield families from ruin, and encourage fair competition. Today, we have new tools to stop taxpayer-funded bailouts and a new consumer watchdog to protect us from predatory lending and abusive credit card practices. And in the past year alone, about 10 million uninsured Americans finally gained the security of health coverage. At every step, we were told our goals were misguided or too ambitious, that we would crush jobs and explode deficits. Instead, we've seen the fastest economic growth in over a decade, our deficits cut by 2/3, a stock market that has doubled, and healthcare inflation at its lowest rate in 50 years. This is good news, people. So the verdict is clear. Middle-class economics works. Expanding opportunity works. And these policies will continue to work as long as politics don't get in the way. We can't slow down businesses or put our economy at risk with government shutdowns or fiscal showdowns. We can't put the security of families at risk by taking away their health insurance or unraveling the new rules on Wall Street or refighting past battles on immigration when we've got to fix a broken system. And if a bill comes to my desk that tries to do any of these things, I will veto it. It will have earned my veto. Today, thanks to a growing economy, the recovery is touching more and more lives. Wages are finally starting to rise again. We know that more small business owners plan to raise their employees' pay than at any time since 2007. But here's the thing. Those of us here tonight, we need to set our sights higher than just making sure government doesn't screw things up. The government doesn't halt the progress we're making. We need to do more than just do no harm. Tonight, together, let's do more to restore the link between hard work and growing opportunity for every American. Because families like Rebecca's still need our help. She and Ben are working as hard as ever, but they've had to forego vacations and a new car so that they can pay off student loans and save for retirement. Friday night pizza, that's a big splurge. Basic child care for Jack and Henry costs more than their mortgage and almost as much as a year at the University of Minnesota. Like millions of hardworking Americans, Rebecca isn't asking for a handout, but she is asking that we look for more ways to help families get ahead. And in fact, at every moment of economic change throughout our history, this country has taken bold action to adapt to new circumstances and to make sure everyone gets a fair shot. We set up worker protections Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, to protect ourselves from the harshest adversity. We gave our citizens schools and colleges, infrastructure, and the internet, tools they needed to go as far as their efforts and their dreams will take them. That's what middle-class economics is. The idea that this country does best when everyone gets their fair shot. Everyone does their fair share. Everyone plays by the same set of rules. We don't just want everyone to share in America's success, we want everyone to contribute to our success. So what does middle-class economics require in our time? First, middle-class economics means helping working families feel more secure in a world of constant change. It means helping folks afford childcare, college, health care, a home, retirement. And my budget will address each of these issues, lowering the taxes of working families and putting thousands of dollars back into their pockets each year. Here's one example. During World War II, when men like my grandfather went off to war, having women like my grandmother in the workforce was a national security priority. So this country provided universal child care. In today's economy, when having both parents in the workforce is an economic necessity for many families, we need affordable, high-quality child care more than ever. It's not a nice to have. It's a must-have. So it's time we stop treating child care as a side issue or as a women's issue and treat it like the national economic priority that it is for all of us. And that's why my plan will make quality child care more available and more affordable for every middle-class and low-income family with young children in America by creating more slots and a new tax cut of up to $3,000 per child per year. Here's another example. Today, we are the only advanced country on earth that doesn't guarantee paid sick leave or paid maternity leave to our workers. 43 million workers have no paid sick leave. 43 million. Think about that. And that forces too many parents to make the gut-wrenching choice between a paycheck and a sick kid at home. So I'll be taking new action to help states adopt paid leave laws of their own. And since paid sick leave won where it was on the ballot last November, let's put it to a vote right here in Washington. Send me a bill that gives every worker in America the opportunity to earn 7 days of paid sick leave. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Of course, nothing helps families make ends meet like higher wages. That's why this Congress still needs to pass a law that makes sure a woman is paid the same as a man for doing the same work. It's 2015. It's time. We still need to make sure employees get the overtime they've earned. And everyone in this Congress who still refuses to raise the minimum wage, I say this. If you truly believe you could work full-time and support a family on less than $15,000 a year, try it. If not, vote to give millions of the hardest working people in America a raise. Now, these ideas won't make everybody rich, won't relieve every hardship. That's not the job of government. To give working families a fair shot, we still need more employers to see beyond next quarter's earnings and recognize that investing in their workforce is in their company's long-term interest. We still need laws that strengthen rather than weaken unions and give American workers a voice. But you know, things like child care and sick leave and equal pay, things like lower mortgage premiums and a higher minimum wage, these ideas will make a meaningful difference in the life. That's a fact. And that's what all of us, Republicans and Democrats alike, were sent here to do. And second, to make sure folks keep earning higher wages down the road, we have to do more to help Americans upgrade their skills. You know, America thrived in the 20th century because we made high school free, sent a generation of GIs to college, trained the best workforce in the world. We were ahead of the curve. But other countries caught on. And in a 21st century economy that rewards knowledge like never before, we need to up our game. We need to do more. By the end of this decade, 2 in 3 job openings will require some higher education. 2 in 3. And yet we still live in a country where too many bright, striving Americans are priced out of the education they need. It's not fair to them, and it's sure not smart for our future. And that's why I'm sending this Congress a bold new plan to lower the cost of community college to 0. Keep in mind, 40% of our college students choose community college. Some are young and starting out. Some are older and looking for a better job. Some are veterans and single parents trying to transition back into the job market. Whoever you are, this plan is your chance to graduate ready for the new economy without a load of debt. Understand, you've got to earn it. You've got to keep your grades up and graduate on time. Tennessee, a state with Republican leadership, and Chicago, a city with Democratic leadership, are showing that free community college is possible. I want to spread that idea all across America so that 2 years of college becomes as free and universal in America as high school is today. Let's stay ahead of the curve. And I want to work with this Congress to make sure those already burdened with student loans can reduce their monthly payments so that student debt doesn't derail anyone's dreams. Thanks to Vice President Biden's great work to update our job training system, we're connecting community colleges with local employers to train workers to fill high-paying jobs like coding and nursing and robotics. Tonight, I'm also asking more businesses to follow the lead of companies like CVS and UPS and offer more educational benefits and paid apprenticeships, opportunities that give workers the chance to earn higher-paying jobs even if they don't have a higher education. And as a new generation of veterans comes home, we owe them every opportunity to live the American dream they helped defend. Already, we've made strides towards ensuring that every veteran has access to the highest quality care. We're slashing the backlog that had too many veterans waiting years to get the benefits they need. And we're making it easier for vets to translate their training and experience into civilian jobs. And joining forces, the national campaign launched by Michelle and Jill Biden. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jill. Has helped nearly 700,000 veterans and military spouses get a new job. So to every CEO in America, let me repeat, if you want somebody who's going to get the job done and done right, hire a veteran. Finally, as we better train our workers, we need the new economy to keep churning out high-wage jobs for our workers to fill. Since 2010, America has put more people back to work than Europe, Japan, and all advanced economies combined. Our manufacturers have added almost 800,000 new jobs. Some of our bedrock sectors, like our auto industry, are booming. But there are also millions of Americans who work in jobs that didn't even exist 10 or 20 years ago. Jobs at companies like Google and eBay and Tesla. So no one knows for certain which industries will generate the jobs of the future. But we do know we want them here in America. We know that. And that's why the third part of middle-class economics is all about building the most competitive economy anywhere, the place where businesses want to locate and hire. 21st century businesses need 21st century infrastructure, modern ports and stronger bridges, faster trains, and the fastest internet. Democrats and Republicans used to agree on this. So let's set our sights higher than a single oil pipeline. Let's pass a bipartisan infrastructure plan that could create more than 30 times as many jobs per year and make this country stronger for decades to come. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. 21st century businesses, including small businesses, need to sell more American products overseas. Today, our businesses export more than ever, and exporters tend to pay their workers higher wages. But as we speak, China wants to write the rules for the world's fastest growing region. That would put our workers and our businesses at a disadvantage. Why would we let that happen? We should write those rules. We should level the playing field. That's why I'm asking both parties to give me trade promotion authority to protect American workers with strong new trade deals from Asia to Europe that aren't just free, but are also fair. It's the right thing to do. Look, I'm the first one to admit that past trade deals haven't always lived up to the hype. And that's why we've gone after countries that break the rules at our expense. But 95% of the world's customers live outside our borders. We can't close ourselves off from those opportunities. More than half of manufacturing executives have said they're actively looking to bring jobs back from China. So let's give them one more reason to get it done. 21st century businesses will rely on American science and technology, research and development. I want the country that eliminated polio and mapped the human genome to lead a new era of medicine, one that delivers the right treatment at the right time. In some patients with cystic fibrosis, this approach has reversed a disease once thought unstoppable. So tonight I'm launching a new precision medicine initiative to bring us closer to curing diseases like cancer and diabetes, and to give all of us access to the personalized information we need to keep ourselves and our families healthier. We can do this. I intend to protect a free and open internet, extend its reach to every classroom in every community, and help folks build the fastest networks so that the next generation of digital innovators and entrepreneurs have the platform to keep reshaping our world. I want Americans to win the race for the kinds of discoveries that unleash new jobs, converting sunlight into liquid fuel, creating revolutionary prosthetics so that a veteran who gave his arms for his country can play catch with his kids again, pushing out into the solar system, not just to visit, but to stay. Now, last month, we launched a new spacecraft as part of a re-energized space program that will send American astronauts to Mars. And in 2 months, to prepare us for those missions, Scott Kelly will begin a year-long stay in space. So good luck, Captain. Make sure to Instagram it. We're proud of it. Now, the truth is, when it comes to issues like infrastructure and basic research, I know there's bipartisan support in this chamber. Members of both parties have told me so. Where we too often run onto the rocks is how to pay for these investments. As Americans, we don't mind paying our fair share of taxes as long as everybody else does too. But for far too long, lobbyists have rigged the tax code with loopholes that let some corporations pay nothing while others pay full freight. They've riddled it with giveaways that the super rich don't need while denying a break to middle-class families who do. This year we have an opportunity to change that. Let's close loopholes so we stop rewarding companies that keep profits abroad and reward those that invest here in America. Let's use those savings to rebuild our infrastructure and to make it more attractive for companies to bring jobs home. Let's simplify the system and let a small business owner file based on her actual bank statement instead of the number of accountants she can afford. And let's close the loopholes that lead to inequality by allowing the top 1% to avoid paying taxes on their accumulated wealth. We can use that money to help more families pay for child care and send their kids to college. We need a tax code that truly helps working Americans trying to get a leg up in the new economy, and we can achieve that together. We can achieve it together. Helping hardworking families make ends meet, giving them the tools they need for good-paying jobs in this new economy, maintaining the conditions of growth and competitiveness. This is where America needs to go. I believe it's where the American people want to go. It'll make our economy stronger a year from now, 15 years from now, and deep into the century ahead. Of course, if there's one thing this new century has taught us, it's that we cannot separate our work here at home from challenges beyond our shores. My first duty as Commander-in-Chief is to defend the United States of America. In doing so, the question is not whether America leads in the world, but how. When we make rash decisions, reacting to the headlines instead of using our heads, when the first response to a challenge is to send in our military, then we risk getting drawn into unnecessary conflicts and neglect the broader strategy we need for a safer, more prosperous world. That's what our enemies want us to do. I believe in a smarter kind of American leadership. We lead best when we combine military power with strong diplomacy, when we leverage our power with coalition building, when we don't let our fears blind us to the opportunities that this new century presents. That's exactly what we're doing right now. And around the globe, it is making a difference. First, We stand united with people around the world who've been targeted by terrorists, from a school in Pakistan to the streets of Paris. We will continue to hunt down terrorists and dismantle their networks, and we reserve the right to act unilaterally, as we have done relentlessly since I took office, to take out terrorists who pose a direct threat to us and our allies. At the same time, we've learned some costly lessons over the last 13 years. Instead of Americans patrolling the valleys of Afghanistan, we've trained their security forces, who've now taken the lead. And we've honored our troops' sacrifice by supporting that country's first democratic transition. Instead of sending large ground forces overseas, we're partnering with nations from South Asia to North Africa to deny safe haven to terrorists who threaten America. In Iraq and Syria, American leadership, including our military power, is stopping ISIL's advance. Instead of getting dragged into another ground war in the Middle East, we are leading a broad coalition, including Arab nations, to degrade and ultimately destroy this terrorist group. We're also supporting a moderate opposition in Syria that can help us in this effort, and assisting people everywhere who stand up to the bankrupt ideology of violent extremism. Now, this effort will take time. It will require focus. But we will succeed. And tonight, I call on this Congress to show the world that we are united in this mission by passing a resolution to authorize the use of force against ISIL. We need that authority. Second, we're demonstrating the power of American strength and diplomacy. We're upholding the principle that bigger nations can't bully the small by opposing Russian aggression and supporting Ukraine's democracy and reassuring our NATO allies. Last year, as we were doing the hard work of imposing sanctions, along with our allies, as we were reinforcing our presence with the frontline states, Mr. Putin's aggression, it was suggested, was a masterful display of strategy and strength. That's what I heard from some folks. Well, today, it is America that stands strong and united with our allies, while Russia is isolated with its economy in tatters. That's how America leads, not with bluster, but with persistent, steady resolve. You know, in Cuba, we are ending a policy that was long past its expiration date. When what you're doing doesn't work for 50 years, it's time to try something new. And our shift in Cuba policy has the potential to end a legacy of mistrust in our hemisphere. It removes a phony excuse for restrictions in Cuba, stands up for democratic values, and extends the hand of friendship to the Cuban people. And this year, Congress should begin the work of ending the embargo. You know, as His Holiness Pope Francis has said, diplomacy is the work of small steps. These small steps have added up to new hope for the future in Cuba. And after years in prison, we are overjoyed that Alan Gross is back where he belongs. Welcome home, Alan. We're glad you're here. Our diplomacy is at work with respect to Iran, where for the first time in a decade, we've halted the progress of its nuclear program and reduced its stockpile of nuclear material. Between now and this spring, we have a chance to negotiate a comprehensive agreement that prevents a nuclear-armed Iran, secures America and our allies, including Israel, while avoiding yet another Middle East conflict. There are no guarantees that negotiations will succeed, and I keep all options on the table to prevent a nuclear Iran. But new sanctions passed by this Congress at this moment in time will all but guarantee that diplomacy fails, alienating America from its allies, making it harder to maintain sanctions, and ensuring that Iran starts up its nuclear program again. It doesn't make sense. And that's why I will veto any new sanctions bill that threatens to undo this progress. The American people expect us only to go to war as a last resort, and I intend to stay true to that wisdom. Third, we're looking beyond the issues that have consumed us in the past to shape the coming century. No foreign nation, no hacker should be able to shut down our networks, steal our trade secrets, or invade the privacy of American families, especially our kids. So we're making sure our government integrates intelligence to combat cyber threats, just as we have done to combat terrorism. And tonight I urge this Congress to finally pass the legislation we need to better meet the evolving threat of cyber attacks, combat identity theft, and protect our children's information. That should be a bipartisan effort. You know, if we don't act, we'll leave our nation and our economy vulnerable. If we do, we can continue to protect the technologies that have unleashed untold opportunities for people around the globe. In West Africa, our troops, our scientists, our doctors, our nurses, our healthcare workers are rolling back Ebola, saving countless lives and stopping the spread of disease. I could not be prouder of them. And I thank this Congress for your bipartisan support of their efforts. But the job is not yet done, and the world needs to use this lesson to build a more effective global effort to prevent the spread of future pandemics, invest in smart development, and eradicate extreme poverty. In the Asia-Pacific, we are modernizing alliances while making sure that other nations play by the rules in how they trade, how they resolve maritime disputes, how they participate in meeting common international challenges like nonproliferation and disaster relief. And no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. – 2014 was the planet's warmest year on record. Now, one year doesn't make a trend, but this does. 14 of the 15 warmest years on record have all fallen in the first 15 years of this century. I've heard some folks try to dodge the evidence by saying they're not scientists, that we don't have enough information to act. Well, I'm not a scientist either. But you know what? I know a lot of really good scientists at NASA and at NOAA and at our major universities. And the best scientists in the world are all telling us that our activities are changing the climate. And if we don't act forcefully, we'll continue to see rising oceans, longer, hotter heat waves, dangerous droughts and floods, and massive disruptions that can trigger greater migration and conflict and hunger around the globe. The Pentagon says that climate change poses immediate risks to our national security. We should act like it. And that's why That's why over the past 6 years, we've done more than ever to combat climate change, from the way we produce energy to the way we use it. That's why we've set aside more public lands and waters than any administration in history. And that's why I will not let this Congress endanger the health of our children by turning back the clock on our efforts. I am determined to make sure that American leadership drives international action. In Beijing, we made a historic announcement. The United States will double the pace at which we cut carbon pollution, and China committed for the first time to limiting their emissions. And because the world's two largest economies came together, other nations are now stepping up and offering hope that this year the world will finally reach an agreement to protect the one planet we've got. And there's one last pillar of our leadership, and that's the example of our values. As Americans, we respect human dignity even when we're threatened, which is why I have prohibited torture and worked to make sure our use of new technology like drones is properly constrained. It's why we speak out against the deplorable anti-Semitism that has resurfaced in certain parts of the world. It's why we continue to reject offensive stereotypes of Muslims, the vast majority of whom share our commitment to peace. That's why we defend free speech and advocate for political prisoners and condemn the persecution of women or religious minorities or people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. We do these things not only because they are the right thing to do, but because ultimately they will make us safer. As Americans, we have a profound commitment to justice. So it makes no sense to spend $3 million per prisoner to keep open a prison that the world condemns and terrorists use to recruit. Since I've been president, we've worked responsibly to cut the population of Gitmo in half. Now it is time to finish the job, and I will not relent in my determination to shut it down. It is not who we are. It's time to close Gitmo. As Americans, we cherish our civil liberties, and we need to uphold that commitment if we want maximum cooperation from other countries and industry in our fight against terrorist networks. So while some have moved on from the debates over our surveillance programs, I have not. As promised, our intelligence agencies have worked hard with the recommendations of privacy advocates to increase transparency and build more safeguards against potential abuse. And next month, we'll issue a report on how we're keeping our promise to keep our country safe while strengthening privacy. Looking to the future instead of the past. Making sure we match our power with diplomacy and use force wisely. Building coalitions to meet new challenges and opportunities. Leading always with the example of our values. That's what makes us exceptional. That's what keeps us strong. That's why we have to keep striving to hold ourselves to the highest of standards, our own. You know, just over a decade ago, I gave a speech in Boston where I said there wasn't a liberal America or a conservative America, a black America or a white America, but a United States of America. I said this because I had seen it in my own life, in a nation that gave someone like me a chance. Because I grew up in Hawaii, a melting pot of races and customs. Because I made Illinois my home. A state of small towns, rich farmland, one of the world's great cities, a microcosm of the country where Democrats and Republicans and independents, good people, of every ethnicity and every faith share certain bedrock values. Over the past 6 years, the pundits have pointed out more than once that my presidency hasn't delivered on this vision. How ironic, they say, that our politics seems more divided than ever. It's held up as proof, not just of my own flaws, of which there are many, but also as proof that the vision itself is misguided, naive, that there are too many people in this town who actually benefit from partisanship and gridlock for us to ever do anything about it. I know how tempting such cynicism may be, but I still think the cynics are wrong. I still believe that we are one people. I still believe that together we can do great things, even when the odds are long. I believe this because over and over in my 6 years in office, I have seen America at its best. I've seen the hopeful faces of young graduates from New York to California, and our newest officers at West Point, Annapolis, Colorado Springs, New London. I've mourned with grieving families in Tucson, in Newtown, in Boston, in West Texas, in West Virginia. I've watched Americans beat back adversity from the Gulf Coast to the Great Plains, from Midwest assembly lines to the Mid-Atlantic seaboard. I've seen something like gay marriage go from a wedge issue used to drive us apart to a story of freedom across our country, a civil right now legal in states that 7 in 10 Americans call home. So I know the good and optimistic and big-hearted generosity of the American people, who every day live the idea that we are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. And I know they expect those of us who serve here to set a better example. So the question for those of us here tonight is how we, all of us, can better reflect America's hopes. I've served in Congress with many of you. I know many of you well. There are a lot of good people here on both sides of the aisle. And many of you have told me that this isn't what you signed up for. Arguing past each other on cable shows, the constant fundraising, always looking over your shoulder at how the base will react to every decision. Imagine if we broke out of these tired old patterns. Imagine if we did something different. Understand, a better politics isn't one where Democrats abandon their agenda or Republicans simply embrace mine. A better politics is one where we appeal to each other's basic decency instead of our basest fears. A better politics is one where we debate without demonizing each other, where we talk issues and values and principles and facts rather than gotcha moments or trivial gaffes or fake controversies that have nothing to do with people's daily lives. A better politics is one where we spend less time drowning in dark money for ads that pull us into the gutter and spend more time lifting young people up with a sense of purpose and possibility, asking them to join in the great mission of building America. If we're going to have arguments, let's have arguments, but let's make them debates worthy of this body and worthy of this country. We still may not agree on a woman's right to choose, but surely we can agree it's a good thing that teen pregnancies and abortions are nearing all-time lows and that every woman should have access to the health care that she needs. Yes, passions still fly on immigration, but surely we can all see something of ourselves in the striving young student and agree that no one benefits when a hardworking mom is snatched from her child, and then it's possible to shape a law that upholds our tradition as a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. I've talked to Republicans and Democrats about that. That's something that we can share. We may go at it in campaign season, but surely we can agree that the right to vote is sacred, that it's being denied to too many, and that on this 50th anniversary of the Great March from Selma to Montgomery and the passage of the Voting Rights Act, we can come together, Democrats and Republicans, to make voting easier for every single American. We may have different takes on the events of Ferguson and New York, but surely we can understand a father who fears his son can't walk home without being harassed. And surely we can understand the wife who won't rest until the police officer she married walks through the front door at the end of his shift. And surely we can agree that it's a good thing that for the first time in 40 years, the crime rate and the incarceration rate have come down together. And use that as a starting point for Democrats and Republicans, community leaders and law enforcement to reform America's criminal justice system so that it protects and serves all of us. That's a better politics. That's how we start rebuilding trust. That's how we move this country forward. That's what the American people want. And that's what they deserve. I have no more campaigns to run. My only agenda, I know because I won both of them. My only agenda for the next 2 years is the same as the one I've had since the day I swore an oath on the steps of this Capitol. To do what I believe is best for America. If you share the broad vision I outlined tonight, I ask you to join me in the work at hand. If you disagree with parts of it, I hope you'll at least work with me where you do agree. And I commit to every Republican here tonight that I will not only seek out your ideas, I will seek to work with you to make this country stronger. Because I want this chamber, I want this city to reflect the truth that for all our blind spots and shortcomings, we are a people with the strength and generosity of spirit to bridge divides, to unite in common effort, to help our neighbors, whether down the street or on the other side of the world. I want our actions to tell every child in every neighborhood, your life matters. And we are committed to improving your life chances, as committed as we are to working on behalf of our own kids. I want future generations to know that we are a people who see our differences as a great gift, that we're a people who value the dignity and worth of every citizen. Man and woman, young and old, black and white, Latino, Asian, immigrant, Native American, gay, straight, Americans with mental illness or physical disability. Everybody matters. I want them to grow up in a country that shows the world what we still know to be true, that we are still more than a collection of red states and blue states, that we are the United States of America. want them to grow up in a country where a young mom can sit down and write a letter to her president with a story that sums up these past 6 years. It's amazing what you can bounce back from when you have to. We are a strong, tight-knit family who's made it through some very, very hard times. My fellow Americans, we too are a strong, tight-knit family. We too have made it through some hard times. 15 years into this new century, we have picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves off, and begun again the work of remaking America. We have laid a new foundation. A brighter future is ours to write. Let's begin this new chapter together. And let's start the work right now. Thank you. God bless you. God bless this country we love. Thank you.
President Obama completing his next to last State of the Union. We heard it all, and back to talk more about what the president had to talk about tonight is what I'm calling our political heavy hitters. And if you saw us before the show, you can see why I'm continuing that title. I want to thank Roland, James, David, and Crystal for joining me. I want to get right into it. I want to start with you, James. Let's talk about what the president talked about. And I want to start with the fact that he keeps talking about working with this Congress, and he said that while also saying that he was going to take action on his own on a couple of things as well. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you go through the laundry list of issues, and I thought it was interesting. They said, I'm not going to give a laundry list of points, and then he gave a laundry list of points. You know, there are really issues that this country and conservatives and progressives have been debating for decades. There's nothing that he said that wouldn't have come up in any debate between conservatives and progressives. So it's really hard to interpret that as anything other than just what you would expect from the president, which is a speech kind of laying out a progressive agenda, which is fine. But to pretend it's anything but that, I think, is not accurate.
Roland, how do you think he did?
Again, there are clear issues where you can have Democrats and Republicans standing side by side. I wish in the speech the president had said more about criminal justice reform. Because if you look at that particular issue, I mean, you have Republican governors who are looking at the fiscal irresponsibility of putting so many people in jail, putting folks who are nonviolent offenders. That is something that I think he could have challenged them on and said, look, let's change mandatory minimums. He signed one of the bill when he first came in, reducing the crack cocaine, the powder cocaine disparity, 101 to now 18-1. It shouldn't even be 18-1. It should be 1-1. It's the exact same thing. Cocaine is cocaine. And so I think he could have pushed on that. So there are those particular issues. He mentioned infrastructure. Look, that has always been an issue, whether you're Republican or Democrat. You understand rebuilding the country. We just, we had that fundamental issue as well. So the question will be, and of course, infrastructure, that's also tied to jobs. And so the question will be, will Republicans in the House and the Senate move on that particular issue? So there were issues that you talked about where you could have Democrats and Republicans come together. The question is, will they actually take that kind of measure?
Can I just go back to that?
Sure.
Because you raised a good point. So criminal justice reform, I think Roland's absolutely right. That is something where there are a lot of conservative Americans that are deeply interested in criminal justice reform. It is something where the president could get together with them. He didn't really dwell on that or talk about that in the speech at all. So that kind of goes against your point.
Well, he didn't talk about it, but again, Attorney General Eric Holder, for the past
but it's
several
not in
months,
the speech.
No, I understand that. My point is, the Attorney General has been laying that foundation for the past 18 months, and he did mention, of course, the whole issue in terms of Ferguson and also protecting of police. But I thought, again, on that particular issue, he could have gone further, and that was an example where he could have said, there are Republicans sitting here right now who agree with me on this, and so that was. But that's still, even though he didn't. But no, my point is, even though he didn't mention the speech,
Right, I wanna bring
it is
Crystal
an
in the
issue that he can still work with them on.
But I think, I was nodding when Roland was talking about criminal justice reform because Senator Rand Paul, as you know, Roland, this is an issue that he is seized with, reducing federal mandatory minimums. And like Roland said, that was a window of opportunity, Jim, like you said, that the president could have said, thrown a bone at Republicans. I know he could have called out Senator Rand Paul for working with our senator from New Jersey, Senator Cory Booker, but he didn't. And I think that goes back to when I was watching it, David and I, when the president launched into the fair share narrative again, David started laughing, I started laughing, and we both said, this sounds like the speech he's been given every State of the Union, since he became president. And I think what that does right away, it turns off the Republicans in Congress. And then he pointed out what I found was really funny, and this was kind of my takeaway about the whole speech as far as domestic policy. He invited Rebecca and Ben in the State of the Union box to sit with Mrs. Obama. And if I was Rebecca and Ben, I'd kick back my shoes and think, wow, the president's we don't really have to work that hard anymore. Because his message to the middle class was, you don't have to pay your fair share because somebody else is going to pay it for you. And I think that's really, I think Americans want to be fair. We want poverty programs, but we want everybody to have skin in the game. And what he does over and over again, he says, why is the middle class some special class? Poverty is raging, and not in the middle class, And then he talks about all this free government, free childcare, free community colleges. Nowhere in the Constitution does that say you're owed that at all. So I think it was just kind of comical.
So David, what should he have said in this? What should he have said in regards to those issues?
Well, he's Obama. I mean, he can only say what he's always been saying. So I find this speech, as someone who spent a fair amount of time reading his speeches, not surprising at all. I mean, this is classic Obama. It's the following narrative. Together we can do great things. And by together he means the federal government. It's his understanding of American history. When we come together, i.e. when the federal government passes massive entitlements, we do great things. And if we keep on doing this, we can continue to do great things. And then there are these nebulous forces lurking that are the 1%, the rich who are not paying their fair share. I see an improvement in his rhetoric, that he has toned down the class warfare. I mean, the Occupy Wall Street spirit is still with him, but it's waned.
Okay, that was a funny one. That was good. That was as funny as the clap.
So in that sense, it's an improvement, but the bedrock liberal assumptions that shape his worldview haven't been dislodged by the past 6 years, and I can't imagine anything will make them change.
Now, the president also made reference to the situations in Ferguson and in New York. Thoughts on the fact that he did feel the need to bring this up, obviously, in the State of the Union, and what does it say about where our country is today in regards to race?
It's the State of the Union. If anybody was paying attention, you probably would bring it up. You can't have hundreds of thousands of people in multiple cities across this country taken to the streets and somehow act as if that is not an issue. He would have been crazy not to bring it up. I mean, it is an absolute issue, and it goes beyond. Again, a couple of cases. Look, I've been covering these type of stories for quite some time. It goes beyond Mike Brown and Eric Garner. It goes to Aiyana Jones in Detroit. It goes to Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Victor White III in New Iberia, Louisiana, Chavis Carter in Jonesboro, Arkansas, Ezell Ford in Los Angeles. And what you've seen, and this is a critical point here, you have seen, as a result of the protest, you've actually seen action. A lot of people forget, in the last Congress, okay, Congressman Bobby Scott had a bill that was passed last year when it came to police having to notify the Department of Justice when someone dies in their custody. It was passed in the House, stalled in the Senate. In the middle of all those protests, it passed the U.S. Senate because those senators were afraid to have their names on placards out there. And so, same thing, Los Angeles Police Department, they passed the body cameras, Houston Police Department as well. So you're seeing the kind of action. He had to bring that up because it is an important issue in America.
I want to agree with Roland. It would have been nuts for the president not to mention what was one of the major cataclysmic events in the United States in the year. But the issue I take is, he didn't talk about any of the things Roland talked about. And what I saw in Ferguson was much like I saw his discussion of foreign policy. It was very much kind of a quick over, check the block in the speech, nothing really in any great depth. So I wish Roland was a speechwriter. I mean, criminal justice reform, yes, yeah, but that's not what we got on these really big issues. I mean, on the foreign policy issues, it was very superficial and went over it. And when I heard the word Ferguson, I was perking up and I was waiting to hear something that was going to move the nation. And I just saw.
Depth is never a word I look at.
I'm going to let Crystal in the conversation.
I think.
I mean, but we got this long narrative about this wonderful couple, and here we have something that is troubling the nation, and
the president. Well, I think I agree with you, Jim, that you know, Rebecca and Ben got top billing in the State of the Union as if, you know, their story was a Ferguson story. And frankly, I think the racial divide in this country that the president claims has gotten a lot better. And what he said in one breath was, this isn't a white America, this isn't a black America. I've always said that. But yet he chooses to weigh in on Ferguson. He weighed in when Trayvon Martin was killed prematurely. No, he shouldn't have. He's the president of the United States.
He should have.
I let you finish. Quite eloquently
should
make
have.
your comment. And then we have two police officers assassinated in the backs of their head who were really unarmed in many respects. The president made no mention of them. Why? Because they were not black and didn't fit this false narrative that Roland wants to embark upon, that black men or that police officers wake up, Eric Garner was gunned down by a bad police officer.
No, Eric Garner was choked.
White, and he was chokehold. Yes,
Yes,
you're
he
right.
wasn't
He was,
gunned down.
I'm sorry.
But
if I could finish, but I guess
sure.
I'm not going to finish because this is the Roland Martin
No,
show.
no, no, no.
Hold on, it's
no.
actually just
hold on,
So
hold on.
what
We
I'm,
wanna be
what
fair.
I'm
We wanna be
trying to
respectful.
say
Go ahead,
is
Crystal.
for a president who claims that he doesn't want to racially divide America in white and black, he did so again tonight. And what really is troublesome is that Eric Gardner, everybody agrees that was a heinous crime committed by a bad police officer. But police officers do not wake up every morning and say, let me go gun out for some blacks like the KKK did in the segregated South. That is a false narrative. And the president, if the president could come out prematurely and talk about Trayvon Martin's shooting death by George Zimmerman, who people want to make a white Hispanic, before the police could even come out and decide if charges should be brought, and we know how the trial in it, right? He couldn't come out when the New York police officers were gunned down. He
you
issued a
talking
statement.
about?
He was on vacation.
So let's talk about, David, you know, in regards to race and in regards to policy, how do you address that? What should President Obama have said to address this particular issue in this country? Because we can see in the conversation, this is an issue in our country. How do we address it? What should he have said? How should he have properly addressed it, in your opinion?
I'm from Canada. I mean, if there's one thing I know as a foreigner is you don't weigh in on race in America. It's an immensely complicated issue. We've been trying to figure it out as a country for several centuries. We mostly don't get it right. I think, I don't know. I mean, this is a big issue. I don't know how you tackle that one in a State of the Union address.
You didn't have to tackle the issue of race because look, you had a white gentleman in Utah who was shot and killed as well. The president, first of all, has created the task force and asked for concrete ideas. He talked also about being able to buy 50,000 body cameras as well. This is an issue where people are affected, and in fact, we saw in Rialto, California, where we saw a dramatic drop in the number of police abuse complaints from citizens. But also, we saw a tremendous drop in terms of police also protected as well. And so that's one of the things there. But again, I've never expected the president to go deep, to have depth in the State of the Union, because they sort of want to cover a variety of things. But I still believe he could have spent more time saying, again, here is a way where we can affect what is happening in America.
But in fairness, right? Again, I mean, you're both talking about things that just kind of weren't in the speech. It's the president's speech. He gets to talk about the things he wants to talk about. As you point out, there were a lot of issues he could have talked about, but he did just do one over the world. And I don't think it's fair to say, well, it's a State of the Union address, he doesn't have time to go in depth in these things, because obviously on some of the issues, he went into some pretty specific
No, I didn't say
detail.
he doesn't have time.
So what we're talking about is
not going in there.
yeah,
That's
but what
I
we're
said.
talking about is his choices. You know, so for example, let's talk about climate change. You talked about a lot about climate change as a national security issue. That was more than superficial, including a claim that climate change is an immediate national security threat, that the Pentagon had said that. So I know there's going to be a lot of reporters out there. I mean, I look at what the Pentagon says very, very closely, and I follow what they say on climate change. I'm going to be interested to see what the footnote is to see where that claim came from. But I think it gets back to the point is it doesn't help. We should be talking about things that are in the speech. And you guys are raising really good issues, and I wish he had talked about those issues in the speech, but he didn't.
So on this point,
I'm talking more, I'm sorry, Dave, but I was just talking more about his comment on black and white America bridging that racial divide, which he hasn't done in his presidency. So I think that was a false claim.
if you go back to Jim's point and you look at the actual speech, I mean, I feel we're getting lost in the weeds, and you look at the big picture. 6 months from now, no one's going to remember the speech.
A week from now.
I was trying to be generous.
That's why.
So I want to point out, David finally found something the entire panel agrees on.
Yeah.
So I mean, this was more the old same. Like I said, I think he's rhetorically chastened a little bit, which is an improvement. Gone are these grandiose promises that he made in some of these early State of the Union addresses or in the inaugural address, which is to be expected after 6 years in office. But I don't find there's much to discuss here. Much of his proposals are not even going to get off the ground in Congress. I don't think there's much to discuss.
And let's talk about that relationship between the president and Congress. I guess after this speech and after what we saw, the response to President Obama making the comment about winning twice, we heard the reaction, we saw the reaction. What can we expect to see out of the president and Congress the next couple of years?
All right, first of all, let's just not skip over that. Whoever was the idiot clapping, you set yourself up to get smacked. Okay? You don't, it's like, oh yeah, you're not running again. You know I kick your behind twice. I mean, when you lose a fight, you don't sit there like, I almost beat you. No, you got your butt beat. So, so that line, we'll remember that one probably a long time. And so a great move on his part. He probably figured, you know, after he yell, you know, you lied last time. Let me come back with something.
Right.
But I'm sure there's some Republicans who were saying, what the hell were you thinking clapping on that? Now you make us look like some doggone fools.
You know, point to Rollins. You know, in fairness, you know, President's had a lot of practice. He's been on, you know, the, you know, a lot of the talk shows, so he's had some practice on it. So he got a good laugh. But I think what's interesting is, and to answer your question, and I'd be interested to see what you think of that, because I was watching is what you always want to watch in the State of the Union address is when does everybody get up and applaud? And what we saw here was kind of the typical thing. We talk about veterans, everybody applaud. Talk about our men and women, everybody applauds. But when you got to the issues, which were clearly partisan issues, half the people applaud.
Yeah.
Well, less than half
And
the
I
people.
want to
offended
pause there
me-
because we're actually going to go to Senator Joni Ernst out of Iowa, who's going to be delivering the Republican response. And of course, we're going to be carrying that live here. So we're going to go right to the Republican response at this very moment.
Iowa, I am proud to speak with you tonight. A few moments ago, we heard the President lay out his vision for the year to come. Even if we may not always agree, it's important to hear a great country. We appreciate the President sharing his. Tonight, though, rather than respond to a speech, I'd like to talk about your priorities. I'd like to have a conversation about the new Republican Congress you just elected and how we plan to make Washington focus on your concerns again. We heard the message you sent in November, loud and clear, and now we're getting to work to change the direction Washington has been taking our country. The new Republican Congress also understands how difficult these past 6 years have been. For many of us, the sting of the economy and the frustration with Washington's dysfunction weren't things we had to read about. We felt them every day. We felt them in Red Oak, the little town in southwestern Iowa where I grew up and am still proud to call home today. As a young girl, I plowed the fields of our family farm. I worked construction with my dad. To save for college, I worked the morning biscuit line at Hardee's. We were raised to live simply, not to waste. It was a lesson my mother taught me every rainy morning. You see, growing up, I had only one good pair of shoes. So on rainy school days, my mom would slip plastic bread bags over them to keep them dry. But I was never embarrassed because the school bus would be filled with rows and rows of young Iowans with bread bags slipped over their feet. Our parents may not have had much, but they worked hard for what they did have. These days, though, many families feel like they're working harder and harder with less and less to show for it, not just in Red Oak, but across the country. We see our neighbors agonize over stagnant wages and lost jobs. We see the hurt caused by canceled healthcare plans and higher monthly insurance bills. We see too many moms and dads put their own dreams on hold while growing more fearful about the kind of future they'll be able to leave to their children. Americans have been hurting, but when we demanded solutions too often, Washington responded with the same stale mindset that led to failed policies like Obamacare. It's a mindset that gave us political talking points, not serious solutions. That's why the new Republican majority you elected started by reforming Congress to make it function again. And now we're working hard to pass the kind of serious job creation ideas you deserve. One you've probably heard about is the Keystone Jobs Bill. President Obama has been delaying this bipartisan infrastructure project for years, even though many members of his party, unions, and a strong majority of Americans support it. The president's own State Department has said Keystone's construction could support thousands of jobs and pump billions into our economy and do it with minimal environmental impact. We worked with Democrats to pass this bill through the House. We're doing the same now in the Senate. President Obama will soon have a decision to make. Will he sign the bill or block good American jobs? There's a lot we can achieve if we work together. Let's tear down trade barriers in places like Europe and the Pacific. Let's sell more of what we make and grow in America over there so we can boost manufacturing wages and jobs right here at home. Let's simplify America's outdated and loophole-ridden tax code. Republicans think tax filing should be easier for you, not just the well-connected. So let's iron out loopholes to lower rates and create jobs, not pay for more government spending. The president has already expressed some support for these kinds of ideas. We're calling on him now to cooperate to pass them. You'll see a lot of serious work in this new Congress. Some of it will occur where I stand tonight, in the Armed Services Committee room. This is where I'll join committee colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, to discuss ways to support our exceptional military and its mission. This is where we'll debate strategies to confront terrorism and the threats posed by Al-Qaeda, ISIL, and those radicalized by them. We know threats like these can't just be wished away. We've been reminded of terrorism's reach, both at home and abroad, most recently in France and Nigeria, but also in places like Canada and Australia. Our hearts go out to all the innocent victims of terrorism and their loved ones. We can only imagine the depth of their grief. For 2 decades, I've proudly worn our nation's uniform. Today, as a lieutenant colonel in the Iowa Army National Guard. while deployed overseas with some of America's finest men and women, I've seen just how dangerous these kinds of threats can be. The forces of violence and oppression don't care about the innocent. We need a comprehensive plan to defeat them. We must also honor America's veterans. These men and women have sacrificed so much in defense of our freedoms and our way of life. They deserve nothing less than the benefits they were promised and a quality of care we can all be proud of. These are important issues the new Congress plans to address. We'll also keep fighting to repeal and replace a health care law that's hurt so many hardworking families. We'll work to correct executive overreach. We'll propose ideas that aim to cut wasteful spending and balance the budget with meaningful reforms, not higher taxes like the president has proposed. We'll advance solutions to prevent the kind of cyber attacks we've seen recently. We'll work to confront Iran's nuclear ambitions. And we'll defend life because protecting our most vulnerable is an important measure of any society. Congress is back to work on your behalf, ready to make Washington focus on your concerns again. We know America faces big challenges, but history has shown there's nothing our nation and our people can't accomplish. Just look at my parents and grandparents. They had very little to call their own except the sweat on their brow and the dirt on their hands. But they worked, they sacrificed, and they dreamed big dreams for their children and grandchildren. And because they did, an ordinary Iowan like me has had some truly extraordinary opportunities because they showed me that you don't need to come from wealth or privilege to make a difference. You just need the freedom to dream big and a whole lot of hard work. The new Republican Congress you elected is working to make Washington understand that too. And with a little cooperation from the president, we can get Washington working again. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you tonight. May God bless this great country of ours, the brave Americans serving in uniform on our behalf, and you, the hardworking men and women who make the United States of America the greatest nation the world has ever known.
All right, welcome back. We're going to close out with just a quick response to Senator Ernst's response to the State of the Union. Obviously, never easy to follow the State of the Union for anybody, Republican or Democrat on either side. I'm just going to open it up. Who wants to share first on what you thought about how she did?
She should have thought Bob and Don. No, the best response was when he responded before the Virginia House. You had people there, you had the audience. I mean, it gave that same sort of feel. But that's about it.
I agree with Roland. I mean, I think Republicans need to get out of this venue of like a cave. It looks like she was, you know, she reminded me of R2-D2 in Star Wars. You know, just very she was robotic. I mean, I'm sorry, you know, it's just bad. And then she started off with the story about the bags on her feet and because her parents couldn't afford shoes. You know, it was hard to listen to her. I kind of tuned her out.
I'm happy to talk about the substance if anybody cares.
Sure, absolutely.
I would say for the response, I would say the same thing I would say about the president's remarks. That for those of us that work on national security and foreign policy issues, we didn't hear anything worth talking about. So we're not, there will be a lot of. David's right. Nobody's going to be talking about this for long, but we will be talking about it for at least 24 hours. Yeah. But the folks that work on my issues, national security and foreign policy, I don't think you could take anything away from either one of those addresses that that's really worth commenting on.
Yeah.
All right.
David said next.
See, David was so not compelled to even speak.
I'll tell you what, on the State of the Union, that really jumped out at me, and I don't understand when the president talked about the right to vote. I don't care which party you're in. When we talk about sending our troops, we talk about defending American principles, we always talk about democracy and the vote. And if that was one moment where I felt both sides could have stood up, when he talked about the right to vote, he mentioned this being the 50th anniversary of Selma as well. And so that was a moment as well where we say, look, you can disagree, we can talk about voter suppression, but the right to vote, that is absolutely a fundamental issue to this country.
Here's what makes me really proud. The three branches of Congress sit down together, everybody respectfully listens to the president's speech, regardless of what they think about the state of politics in the world today. There are very few countries that can happen. Tomorrow they're all going to go back and start yelling at each other. But in America, we play by the rules. We sat down. They listen to the president. He's our president. Tomorrow we move on. I'm proud.
They got
of
drinking
our-
games tonight.
Yeah, that could be.
All right, well, I want to say a special thank you to our panel for joining us, Roland Martin, James Carafano, David Azarad, and Crystal Wright. Thank you all so very much for being a part of this historic moment for the Daily Signal. We are so happy that you all were able to take time out of your evenings to spend it with us and with our viewers. And of course, we'd like to thank you, our viewers. Make sure you keep the conversation going online. You can tweet us on Twitter.
Don't be a twit.
On
Don't be a
Twitter.
Tweet. Don't be a twit.
At Daily Signal. I'm Jamie Jackson. Thank you so much for this privilege. Have a great evening.